sources to corroborate anything that I'm about to say. I'm sure that there are people who are doing research into things like this, and if it's a topic that you actually want to know more about, you should look to those experts instead of listening to me ramble on. This is mainly going to be me talking about my personal opinions, anecdotes, and drawing on real life experiences and feelings. So I don't talk about it much on the channel for a multitude of reasons, but politics plays a very important part in my life. It's something I am very passionate about. I've worked on two political campaigns at the local level in my life in 2016 and in 2024. So, I've always been involved. I have a political science degree. Now my focus was on geopolitics, international relations, foreign policy, things like that. But I dip my toe a little bit into things at the national level, even though it doesn't interest me as much. And, so just as sort of an aside, it's sort of tangentially related to that. I have a double major, political science and digital communications, because my original plan coming out of college was to get into, to use the combination of those two degrees to work in politics to some capacity, whether that's as, like a campaign person, someone like that, working on campaign strategy, campaign communications, things of that sort of nature. The idea was using those two degrees, digital communications and politics, together to carve out a niche for myself in that space. And, I became aware of or involved with, political discussion and kind of becoming acutely aware and diving deeper beyond surface level discussions. I'd say probably around 2013, 2014 or so. And there was a very common reprieve, and I would say it was common probably even up until 2023, by this past election, is when you started to see people kind of cool off on this saying a little bit. But there was a saying you would hear quite often in social media, in politics. You would hear it quite often in other spaces as well, but the saying was very simple. Social media is not real life. So, especially within the realm of politics, we would see these, very extreme takes on places like Twitter, on Facebook. You would see people go on these long, unhinged rants. You would see people posting memes, things of that nature that, were again usually very extreme one way or the other. Very, just not traditional messaging in the political space. Usually the sort of conventional wisdom is you want to play towards the middle a little bit, because the majority of the electorate is not Democrat or Republican. A majority of the electorate are independents that sort of have some liberal and some conservative leanings, and you need to appeal to those people, and the best way to do that is to be as even keel and sort of middle of the road as possible. So you would see these takes, you would get things tweeted at you, you would see tweets, you would see YouTube videos, you would see all these sort of things that felt very outside of what was assumed to be the political mainstream. And the reprieve was always, social media is not real life, so you just ignore that. But I think that 2016 and 2024 especially, but really these last three elections really showed that social media did have years, even though social media was still in its infancy, especially in 2008. But I think the Obama years, especially, social media helped propel him over Hillary Clinton in the Democratic primary. And of course, it's abundantly clear how social media helped Donald Trump win his elections in 2016 and also in 2024. And a major failing of the Harris campaign, especially in hindsight, is how bad their social media campaigns were. And again, I don't want to make this a political discussion. It's more about the topic of social media becoming real life, but I think the political aspect of it is a really strong indication of that. And to be blunt, that shift is what completely pulled me out of wanting to work in politics. Because going through political science, the things you're taught, the way things are explained to be, it's like, oh, this is how the federal government operates, this is how you message, this is how you do this, that, and the other. That's all completely out the window now. I mean, like I have these big, political science textbooks that I spent, this book probably cost me $300-400. It's basically worthless now. Everything that these books say about how you should talk about messaging a policy, how you should talk about promoting a policy or a political position in the media landscape, and all of that is basically completely thrown out the window. And it feels like the entire field has radically shifted over the last decade to something that I personally don't recognize, and it kind of pulled me out of the desire to work in that space. And you're seeing it in other ways as well, like people's social lives. You hear so many stories now of people, especially Generation Z and Generation Alpha, so, the generation just below me. I'm the final year for millennials, being born in 1994. I think I am literally the cutoff for millennials. I think to a certain extent, millennials, we were sort of in this weird spot where really social media started to become ubiquitous, I'd say around 2010, 2011. It existed prior to that, but not everybody had it. We still had phones that weren't smartphones. I had an iPod Touch. I didn't have an iPhone. I didn't get a smartphone until after I'd graduated from high school. I had a BlackBerry at one point in time. We had that. Whereas Gen Z and now especially Gen Alpha have completely grown up with smartphones, with apps, because people don't use websites anymore. Remember back in the day there were probably 20, 30 different websites I used, and social media was different back in the day. It was more about sharing and connecting with like-minded individuals. I had a MySpace. But not only did I have a MySpace, this might be a blast to the past for some of my older audience, I had a Vampire Freaks. Do you remember vampirefreaks.com if you were a scene kid, an emo kid like I was in high school? There were all these different social media platforms, but now it's all kind of been condensed down, and the web in general has been condensed down to a small number of websites. And so I think, millennials, we were kind of the last generation that still, I would say, had a majority of our social life, and probably for a lot of us, if not most of us still to this day, has a majority of our social life offline. But there's been recent studies, a majority of social interaction for Gen Z and Gen Alpha all takes place online through social media. They're not interacting face-to-face as much, it's all digital communications. And the problem with that, of course, is that to a certain extent, social media is not real life, because social media is very tailored. The only social media I still use at this point is Instagram, unless you count this as social media, but I don't really share personal things here. This is me creating content that I enjoy making, and it's a creative outlet for me primarily. If you guys decide to watch the videos. That's a bonus, but ultimately this is a creative outlet for me. But the only social media I use as a social media still is Instagram. I deleted TikTok a long time ago because I noticed it was unhealthy for me to be using it because I was just doom scrolling. I deleted Facebook like almost a decade ago at this point. I deleted Twitter a couple years ago. I have Snapchat, but that's just because I have a couple of friends who, I don't know why, but we primarily talk through Snapchat, but that's the only reason I have that. I have Discord. I don't know if that really counts as social media. But and on my Instagram, I post pictures like just earlier today. My fiance and I, we went for a nice hike up through the Blue Mountains. I posted a selfie of us plus some other photos. I didn't post, the bad photo we took with our eyes closed, or, I look a little bit fat at that angle. Let's take another photo, adjust the lighting. It's all fake, it's all tailored, and especially social media influencers who are promoting this very specific lifestyle. It's all fake. Like, we know there's private jets that people rent specifically just to do social media photo shoots that never actually take off. They're just sitting on the tarmac and you pay $100 to take pictures for 15-20 minutes. There's, you can rent out, some people have these mansions you can rent out for an hour at a time to take photos or record video content to promote this fake life on social media. And you have this attitude now as a young, I'm only speaking to an American audience. I can only speak to the attitudes growing up in the United States, what I saw in people younger than me that I talked to, that I interacted with. Because I've been in workplaces and school situations where I've interacted with a lot of younger people. I went back to college. I finished my degree later in life, so there was a time where I was in my mid to late 20s. But a lot of my classmates were 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. So, I was seeing this sort of next wave of adults coming into adulthood. And I saw the differences, and especially, they see these very tailored social media content creators, and they feel like if their life isn't living up to that unrealistic expectation, then they're failing in some manner, and you're seeing rates of depression skyrocket, anxiety skyrocket. I saw this study the other day. I was reading this article. I don't want to misquote it, but I can't remember the exact figures, but it was something along the lines of, in Gen Z, on average, they did this survey, a good salary is considered $400,000 a year. Like, they don't think they're making good money unless they're making $400,000 a year minimum. I don't think, if you're living in reality, I need to tell you how ridiculous that is. 99.9% of people will never earn $400,000 a year. That is such a small minority of the population that will ever earn that much money. Like, there are some surgeons who do not earn $400,000 a year, and that's after going through like 10 years of medical school. There are top lawyers who are not earning $400,000 a year. But this is all because they're seeing these people who are promoting this lifestyle, which likely they're not even actually living. It's all a facade, but they think they have to keep up with that. But Gen Z, I believe, it's either them or Gen Alpha, but I believe Gen Z is the most populous. They're the largest generation, at least in the United States. So you have this expectation amongst this large group, millions and millions and millions of people that think they need to be living up to these standards. That's obviously not possible, especially as it looks like at the moment inflation's going to start going back up. The United States economy will probably likely start to go into a downturn. Whether it's long-term, short-term, nobody knows. But you're going to see these people, especially Gen Z, they're now kind of starting to get to that point where where they're starting to establish careers. But if wages stagnate, if layoffs start happening, whatever it is that'll happen, I'm not an economist. You already have these record highs in depression and things like that. That's going to get even worse. And it's because social media has started to become real life, because people are spending more time on social media as a part of these fake experiences than they are in the real world. And I'm not trying to be on a high horse. I'm preaching to the choir here. I have been guilty of this, and it is an attitude that I specifically tried, worked to pull myself out of. Because you realize, so often these people are just lying. And I don't think that all the blame should go to the people that are engaging in this, because ultimately it's also a failure of the social contract, especially in the United States. There's a complete lack of third places. If you're under 21 in the United States, where can you go to hang out with friends that doesn't cost a lot of money? There is nowhere. Oh, let's go hang out at the mall. That's kind of a thing that used to happen a lot when I was a teenager. Oh, we'll hang out at the mall. Well, first of all, a lot of malls now are shutting down and being abandoned as online shopping takes over. And a lot of the ones that still exist have loitering laws, and everything you're surrounded by things that require you to spend money. And then, okay, you can go to the public library, but you have to be quiet, and a lot of the hangout places are restaurants or bars, and obviously if you're under 21 you can't go to a bar, and if you're going to a restaurant you're going to pay to eat and sit down, and they tend to want to rush you out the door after you finish your meal. So it's public parks, there's still some of those around, but if you don't have a vehicle or whatever else, and these places are rapidly shrinking, and there's not anything there. And those places used to be church was the main one, especially for my parents' generation older, but starting with Gen X, but especially millennial, Gen Z, religiousness is going down, church attendance is going down. I know there's been small little resurgences in it here and there, but small little resurgences, long-term trends tend to hold. Religiosity is going down year over year. Churches are going out of fashion as that third place. More and more churches are closing down. And again, public parks. And then you also, with public parks, you run into the issue with safety and security. And, you have to feel safe to go to those places and everything else. So instead, people are making their communities in online spaces, and that leads to echo chambers, and that leads to having the thing that you see all the time is people say something oh, everybody thinks that, or everybody likes that, or everybody does that, when that's clearly not true. But the reason they believe that is because the entirety of their social existence is wrapped up in these self-curated, self-segregating communities where everybody agrees with each other. And if all you ever do is sit there and listen to people parrot back at you exactly what you think, that is extremely dangerous, and that leads to very bad social outcomes. And I think we're already starting to see that a bit in the United States and in other parts of the Western world as well. Where if you look at kids now, you look at teenagers now, what careers do they want to have? TikTok star, content creator, those are 1 and 2. Now, back in my day, to sound old, of course movie star was up there, or musician. And maybe this is just I finally have had my first boomer moment, but I feel like movie star and musician, there is a different element of them compared to like content creator or TikTok star, because like I theoretically am a content creator, even though I hate using that term. I don't have any talent. This isn't a talent. But being a movie star, you have to be able to act. Usually you have to go to lots of classes and training. There is a barrier of entry, same with being a musician. And I think that barrier to entry is important, and so much of the focus on the 2010s was about breaking down these barriers to entry, like, oh, anybody can be a photographer now with their phone. Oh, that was like such a huge thing, like, oh, anybody can be a photographer, you have a professional camera in your pocket. And what have we seen in the consequences of that? The professional camera market is stagnating, like camera sales are at an all-time low. Professional photographers, their wages have not budged in like 10 years. Like, people are charging the same for a wedding package today as they did in like 2005. Because if they tried to charge more to keep up with how much more expensive cameras have become, because there's fewer competition in the market, everyone's just using their phone. Someone's just gonna have their cousin with their iPhone take photos. But then when they go to blow those up and put them on a canvas or whatever else, like, they're gonna realize how bad it was. But again, that doesn't matter. And so much of the 2010s was focused on breaking down the barriers to entry. We never really stopped and thought about why those barriers to entry existed in the first place. And I think now we're starting to see that, and we've seen how education has been devalued. And I have this thought all the time, it keeps me up at night. It's like, yeah, who's gonna be our doctors and lawyers in 20 years? Who's gonna be engineers? Because you also are seeing college attendance go drastically down, especially among men. College attendance is way down. College graduation rates are way down. So fewer people are going to college, and with the people who are going, fewer of them are graduating. Even as colleges sort of relax their graduation standards to try to get more people to graduate, they're not graduating. You're seeing people who, because they spend all their time on social media, they don't actually understand the language they grew up speaking and reading. And again, 20, 30, 40 years, who are our doctors, who are our lawyers, who are our engineers, who are our politicians? And all of this, I think, comes back to social media becoming real life. People do not have the ability to separate. And I fall victim to this all the time. I'll see like a tweet or something, and it'll say something that I personally feel is very outlandish and extreme and I disagree with. And I'll see like, oh, it has 30,000 likes. Which honestly, something getting 30,000 likes is nothing. It's nothing. But I'll be like, oh man, I can't believe there's so many people agree with this, and so many people think this, like, this is so terrible, da 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 da. But then you realize, well, no, it's not, because a percentage of those are going to be fake, and a percentage of those are going to be, that's 30,000 people. That's a small town with, like, that's considered dying or stagnating or something. Like, it's nothing, it's nobody. Just use that as an example. But it gets so easy to get caught up in that. And I think we really have to be careful and be considerate and think about how we interact with and allow social media to work, because it's becoming more ubiquitous. When it first started, it was all very personal. It was me sharing my thoughts, it was me sharing my photos, my experiences, and it was all very user-driven, user-focused, user-generated. But now it is much different. It's all brand-focused, it's all economy-driven, market-driven, and I'm sure, like, everyone notices, even here on YouTube, it feels way worse, way grosser, way different. But it's now being used, obviously, as a political tool, as a societal tool, a way to shape narratives societally, socially. And it just seems very, very dangerous to be in this world where the perceived reality, or the medium through which which we allow ourselves to learn things and to socialize, to then enact a change in the real world on behalf of that, is all digital, is all algorithm driven, is all being pushed to our eyeballs. And I think we need to decouple social media from real life. And I think that we need to, I don't know, I read this article on Medium that's, there's this quote from this article I want to read, just real quick. Social media is killing personal connections. Yes, you can connect with thousands of people, but will you ever form any kind of connection with them? Yes, you can see what your friends and family are doing, but how does checking in with them online beat inviting them over for dinner to talk? Not only that, but it's killing our perception of ourselves. Everything on social media is perfect and flawless. We are not. Our brains want to believe that everyone else is living their best lives while we face our daily struggles. Nobody posts their financial struggles or their relationship problems, so it's easy to wonder, why me? Why does my life suck? I felt like a failure at the age of 22. I felt like my life was over and it hadn't even started yet, all because I scrolled on social media and compared my life to someone else's life. And part of me thought that during the pandemic that it would be like a reset button, that after being inside for so long in lockdown, being forced to only have those interactions digitally, people would have this yearning, this desire to form something more real. But it seems like it almost just accelerated things, like it almost just turned the dial up to 11 in a sense, and people became even more reclusive, even more withdrawn into social media spaces, and perhaps ultimately did damage that cannot be undone. Anyways, just a little bit of a ramble. I think I've talked about a topic sort of adjacent to this in the past, but it is something that I'm very passionate about. It is something that I spend a lot of time thinking about, the social unraveling of the world around me. But anyways, guys, thank you so very much for watching. Let me know what you think about all this in the comments down below. If you liked this video, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more content just like this every single week. Till next time, guys. Bye bye.